Hello, and today I'm here to convince you to use your wildcard only 4 game weeks in, and here's why. At the start of FPL, the team you choose might be very good options, but mainly based on last season's stats and performances, such as Liverpool defenders because some of them scored over 200 points. It was a similar situation with Man United defence the year before, after they had 18 clean sheets, but then they only had 7 last season, and similar situation with Burnley. But the point I'm trying to make is just because something happened last season doesn't mean the same is going to happen again. But also it could. The only way we're going to tell is when the season actually gets underway and we're a few weeks in. Game week 4 ends September 1st and game week 5 starts the 14th of September because there's an international break. I think this will be the best time to get in a few of those players that have been performing well, which the wildcard does by allowing you to make unlimited transfers before the next deadline. And you will also be able to see by now if the newcomers have settled in and potentially get that edge over other FPL players. The 2-week break is a great time to review some of the players, and obviously 4 games might not be enough to see 11 standout players, but you should have a much better and balanced team than you did at the start of the season. And obviously you can still make transfers every week if there's other players doing well. There is also an international break after game week 8, but I'm just going to be looking at the first one here. But if you decide to do this, this means your first team should actually be based only for the first 4 fixtures, which could change your draft up a bit. So now we're going to look at the teams with the best first 4 games to build a team just for the game weeks 1 to 4. So I found this website which makes it easier to see, called Football Fallout, not sponsored, but you can choose first 4 game weeks, but it simply adds the fixture difficulty ranking numbers, and these are the results. As you can see, Liverpool, Everton, Palace and Villa have FDR of 10 in the first 4, and Chelsea, Bournemouth, Watford, Leicester and West Ham have 11. So if you're going to do this strategy, you should mainly aim for these team players, but now let's look at them team by team. Then show the teams together by game week, and then suggest a kind of team layout you should go by to follow this strategy. First, with FDR of 10 in the first 4 is Liverpool, who are basically fixture proof. They have 3 green games and 1 top 6 team at home. All Liverpool players should pick up quite a few points here, and I know I would definitely go for at least 2 Liverpool players. And I'm also looking to captain a Liverpool forward, which for most people will be Salah. Everton are only one of 2 teams not playing a top 6 team in the first 4, and their harder games are at home, so I would look for at least 2 Everton players again. Even though they can be shaky, I think they could get a lot of points. Crystal Palace play 2 promoted teams, Everton but also Man United, and it is unsure if Zaha will be there and how they will do without Wan-Bissaka, but I think if Zaha stays he could get a lot of points, and it might even be worth having a Palace player even if he's not, like Milivojevic. Villa are the only ones here that even though they have 3 green games, 2 of them are against teams already here in Everton and Palace, and they also play Spurs first. It is also very hard to tell if they will even do that well, but with most of their players being cheap, it may be worth a punt depending on how risky you want to go. Then we move to the teams with 11 FDR in the first 4. We start with Bournemouth. Now they do have a good few forward players, and they always seem to score a decent amount of goals. Defence can be shaky, but they do play 2 promoted teams to start, so I would definitely go for at least 1 forward, maybe 2, but then they do follow with 2 hard games afterwards. Chelsea have a difficult start, but then their 3rd and 4th games are 2 promoted teams, the opposite of Bournemouth, so as I'll discuss later, perfect time to swap. But all Chelsea players are also quite cheap, so I would wait for the first 2 game weeks, see who is playing well, and then look to bring in one of them in game weeks 3 and 4. Leicester are also in the same position as Chelsea, 2 harder games to start and then 2 easier games. Leicester also look better under Rodgers and have some very good value players in Tielemans and Perez, who could be good to bring in into game week 3 and 4. West Ham start with Man City, but then 3 easier games afterwards. They have a few new forward signings who could be good to keep a lookout for, as they could be great value for money, but would be a risk to start. Then the last one here is the only other team not playing a top 6 team in the first 4, which is Watford. But FDR determines away to Everton as a very hard game, but their other games could be quite good for points, especially with having 2 cheap forwards in Dini and Deulofeu, who could be very good to start. Also a mention to Man City's fixtures, as they're obviously fixture proof, but West Ham, Spurs, Bournemouth and Brighton aren't bad fixtures at all, and I would want to have Man City defender and attacker to get those points. A few of the other teams have a couple of good fixtures, but also bad, so these teams would be better, but of course fixtures don't always mean everything, but it's always better to target the easier games. So game week by game week, you should aim for this. So your team for the very first week should be ready enough to cover all the fixtures of the first 4, and only the first 4. So starting with Liverpool, Bournemouth, Everton, Man City, and potentially Palace and Watford. Same in game week 2 with maybe West Ham, and then Leicester and Chelsea players coming in at game week 3 and 4, and Bournemouth players coming out. So game week 1, you should start with at least 1 from each of the main teams here. Game week 2, you should only transfer if you need to for an injury or suspension, for example. Then game week 3, 2 transfers for getting out the 2 Bournemouth attacking players and swapping out for a Chelsea and or Leicester player player who I could see is performing good by then. And game week 4 transfer it if you feel like it, and then after that use your wildcard. You could get in all the good players that have been getting good points, or at least have been playing well and have a good few fixtures afterwards. So now I'm going to give you a team template to kind of follow to cover all these fixtures. You can go for any goalkeeper, but I would recommend Fabianski for West Ham, Digne or Coleman, Trent, Robbo, Van Dijk, Laporte, Walker, Zinchenko, Holebas, Van Aanholt, Salah, Mane, Brooks or Fraser, Siggy or Richarlison, Sterling, De Bruyne and Bernardo, Zaha, Anderson, Wilson King and Delafeu Dini. So obviously this is too many players. You might also have to have some other cheaper alternatives to be able to get some of the better players in. And obviously you can put in other players from other teams if you think they can do well against hard fixtures. Like players like Vardy or Kane I think could still do really well in hard games. But these are the players you should definitely aim for game weeks 1 to 4. In my next video I will be going through my latest draft with the intent of using my wildcard after game week 4. So be sure to check that one out. But now we're going to briefly look at the best fixtures after game week 4 to see what kind of players you should look out for. Arsenal only play one top 6 team from game week 5 to 16, potentially really good for the premium forwards in Aubameyang and Lacazette. Burnley also only play one top 6 team from game weeks 5 to 14, which could be good to get some really good cheap enablers but still getting decent points. Chelsea only play one top 6 team from game weeks 5 to 12, which could be good because if a youth or cheap player has been performing well enough to be nailed, you could get them in. Everton play 2 top 6 teams from game weeks 5 to 14. If the Everton players you probably have already aren't doing as well as their alternatives, you can swap them or just keep the ones you already have. Man United play 2 top 6 teams from game weeks 5 to 14, and you could see if any of their players are doing really well to get them in. And Spurs also play 2 top 6 teams from game weeks 5 to 17, where I expect Kane to bang in a lot of goals. So again, I think picking a team just for the first 4 game weeks, then using your wildcard after game week 4 would be a really good strategy to get those good performing players in your team early enough to do well this year. So that's it for now. Again, next video I will go through my latest draft based on this exact strategy and things we have discussed, so be sure to check that out, and remember,
don't be a cheeky scrub. Subscribe to Nathan Bacon right now.